Hi, I'm John Knowles, software trainer for Adobe, and today we'll be talking about text and graphics in Premiere Pro. I'll show you how to easily create lower thirds, titles, shapes, how to style your subtitles, all using the new Properties panel. Let's dive right in. If you've used Essential Graphics in Premiere before, you'll notice a major change to the interface. The Essential Graphics panel is no longer in the Window menu. It's been replaced by two new panels, Properties and Graphics Templates. The Properties panel now contains all the controls for styling your text and graphics that were previously available under the Edit tab. And the Graphics Templates panel holds all the templates previously found in the Browse tab of Essential Graphics. So now you have a choice of seeing one or both of these panels, and you can reposition them wherever you want them. So I'll just move the Graphics Templates down here next to my Project panel, and we're going to focus here on the Properties panel. The Properties panel is a versatile addition to Premiere Pro that consolidates all the controls for whatever you have selected in the timeline, whether it's a clip or a graphic. So in this sequence, for example, if I select the clip on the timeline, I will see the standard transform controls as well as crop and audio controls here in the Properties panel. But if I switch to the graphic, I'll see all the controls for manipulating this block of text, the same as I had in the old Essential Graphics panel. So the Properties panel just shifts depending on what you select. All right, I'm going to clear out this graphic and make a new one. I'm going to make a lower third here. So if I select the Type tool, which is the T symbol here at the bottom of the toolbar, and I just click anywhere in the program monitor, and that will set the anchor point for my text. And I'm going to type in this athlete's name. Her name is Journey Wu. And that's all I have to do. Just click and type. And I'm going to select the selection tool like this. This is what I call transform mode, meaning if I just grab this with the selection tool, I can move it around. I can also scale it by dragging it from the corners or from these center dots here. Notice that it's proportional, so I don't have to worry about it getting squeezed or stretched. It's always going to scale proportionally. I can also rotate it by hand. If I hover my mouse right outside the bounding box here and just pull, it's going to rotate around the anchor point, which is this crosshair in the bottom left-hand corner of the text. And if I scroll down in the Properties panel, I can see those changes there being reflected in the Align and Transform section. So as I rotate it, I can see the rotation values change. And if I pull it along, I can see the position values change and so forth. I'm going to reset those really quick here. I'm going to make this rotation, just type in a 0, set that back. I can move it back to where I want here. And I'll scale that back down just a little bit. Now, if I want to change something in the text, I want to go back into edit mode. Right now, the bounding box is blue. If I reselect the Type tool, notice the bounding box turns red. If I were to click on it, I wouldn't see the transform controls. I would see the cursor. And in that case, I could put in a middle initial or something like that, or correct the spelling on this name if I wanted to. So that's edit mode. You have to be on the Type tool to get the red bounding box and the cursor. Go back to the selection tool. It will change back into transform mode. Now notice if I deselect that piece of text here, I will see different sets of transform controls and other controls here. That's for the overall graphic. And if I reselect that type, the controls will change to just focus on that piece of type there inside the graphic. Under text, I can select the font. Right now I'm on MOGRTs Pro. I can scroll through all of the fonts I currently have loaded on my system, whether those are Adobe fonts or not. If I like a font in particular, I may want to favorite it and click the star, and that will put it at the top of the panel. I can also choose a filter up here. So I do like MOGRTs Pro a lot. So you know what? I'm going to star that one. And if I choose this filter here, I'm only going to see the fonts that I have starred. So it's a way to kind of limit that list and not show me all the different fonts I have loaded, because maybe I have a lot going right now. And then below that, once you've chosen a font, if it has different weights, they'll be available in this drop down here. So MOGRTs Pro right now is in regular. I could go condensed, semi-bold, semi-condensed, light. Actually, that looks pretty good. So we're going to stick with light for now. Next to that are some faux options. Quick typography tip. If your font has a bold weight or an italic weight available to it, and you'll see those in the drop-down menu below, you're better off using those. These faux styles simply add a slant in the case of the italics, or for the bold, it's just going to make the letters a little bit thicker. But the appearance of the font will be much better if you use the weights that come with it. Next to those two faux options is an all caps option or a small caps option. Next to that are options for superscript or subscript. That's for scenarios where you have something like a copyright symbol, for example, and you don't want to make that the same size as the rest of the typography here, so you can do that, which puts it smaller and locks it to either the below the baseline or the same height as the capitals right there. I'm just going to delete that out for now. And next to that, we have an option to underline. Below that is an option for font size. Right now, this is at about 70. I'm going to increase that a little bit. And I can also type it in here. So if I know what I want, I click 84 and hit OK. Now, incidentally, you also have controls for the scale of this piece of type here. And I'm going to go reset the scale below to 100. And lock that in. And now I'm going to bring that type size up a little bit more again. For the most part, scale and font size are interchangeable, but what I like to do is leave the scale at 100 and then just use the font size adjustment to really lock in that font size. It's translatable to other graphics. If I say, okay, it needs to be font size 72, 36, 48, someone else can take those measurements and replicate the same type size. And then if I'm going to do animation of this graphic at all, I like to start with my scale at 100. That way I know what the baseline is, and then I can scale up or down from there. So I leave the type at 100 and set the overall size with the type size instead. Now below that, we have options for alignment of the type. And I'm going to create a second line of type here. And I'm going to put in her hometown. And then I can change the alignment. Notice that right now this is saying it's flush left. I could center those against each other, or I can flush right. And the text will move based on the selection there. If I go back to flush left, it remembers the original starting point for that type and it aligns it accordingly. And these elements are actually separate from each other. So I could just double click and highlight the entire second line here with the type tool. And notice if I then change the font size of that, it is independent of the type above it. So I can control each line individually, or sometimes each character individually if I want as well. Now, if I want to change the spacing between these two lines of text, that's this control right here. It looks like two capital A's stacked on top of each other. And I can just scrub in there. I'm just clicking with the mouse and dragging left and right to change those values, or I could type them in again if I wanted to. And I can move them further apart or closer together, like so. This option here is tracking the V and the A with a box around them, and that controls the spacing between all of the characters. So in this case, I'm adding space between every character in those two lines of text, like so. And I can just reset that by going back to 0. And this option here, the V and the A with a slash between them, notice it's grayed out. That's kerning. And kerning is the space between two characters. So in order to activate it, you need to grab the cursor with the text tool and select and spot between two letters. In this case, the capital W and the lowercase o. And then I can change the spacing there by moving them closer together or further apart. Sometimes certain letters, depending on the typeface design, might need to be tucked in just a little bit tighter to give it a better appearance. There we are. Now I'm going to remove that second line of type for now. I'm going to add a new element to this lower third above. Now up here in the layer stack, you see we just have Journey Woo. That's her name. I can add other type elements in here. They don't have to be all in this single text box. I can add a new one. So I'm going to click on this little icon here, and you notice that I have options for different things I can add to this graphic. I'm going to add another text layer. There it is, like so. And I'm going to give her a title. She is a sprinter. All right. Go back to my tool here, and I will pull that below her name for now. And I'm going to decrease the font size. It doesn't need to be as big. So I'm going to go 54. Yeah, that's a little too small. Let me go 64. All right, that looks good. And I'll change the weight of that to be bold. Now, if I select that piece of typography, all the controls are just for that line of text. And if I select her name, the Control-Shift to control that piece of text. Now, notice down here on the graphic, on the timeline, this is all contained in one graphic. That's the beauty of these graphics in Premiere Pro. No matter how many lines of text or graphics, shapes, and things that you add to this block, it's going to be just one track high. It's not multiple tracks. It's only taking up one track. You'll notice, though, it's named Sprinter because that's the topmost element in the layer stack here for this graphic. And that's fine, but I really want to look at this at a glance and know whose graphic it is, which athlete I'm calling out in this particular project. So if I drag Sprinter below Journey Woo in the layer stack just by grabbing it, okay, now I see her name back here in the timeline panel. Now I'm going to add another element here so I can see that second line a little bit better. I'm going to add a colored block underneath it so it really stands out. So again, I'm going to go back to this new item option here. And below you see I have some shapes. I could do rectangle, an ellipse, which would be a circle, or a polygon with multiple sides. So I'm going to go rectangle. And by default, it's a gray box, usually parked right in the middle of the screen here. So I'm just going to quickly grab it with my tool, pull it down here. And you see it says shape 1. I'm actually going to call that title box, just by retyping over the name there. And I'm going to pull that below the word Sprinter. There we go. And I'm just going to resize that box. And I can do that just by grabbing these little blue dots in the corners or the center of the side of that box there, so it wraps nicely around the word Sprinter. And you also notice there's some white circles here in the corners. Well, by grabbing those, you can actually make this a rounded shape. And they all move at once. So if you round all the corners at once, like so, you can pull it in. Or reset it so it's perfect right angles. I'm going to leave it as this rectangle shape for now. And below that, I have color options. So see there under fill, right now it's gray. I'm going to make that orange. So by just selecting that, I come up with the color picker. And again, I can select a color in here. I can also use this eyedropper to pull something from the shot if I want a color. And I can see it reflected right there. It's giving me a preview on the screen. Nothing's quite bright enough. I do want kind of a nice orange, so I'm just going to do that, but I'm going to really saturate it right there in the color picker. And there we go. That's the fill. And I can even change the fill color of that text. So go back up to the word Sprinter, and you see I have the same appearance options here below. I'm going to click on fill, and I'll make the word Sprinter black. I need to clean a few things up. I want to make sure that my typography is completely aligned. So I'm going to select both of those type layers. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select both the name and her title there. So you see Journey Woo and Sprinter are both selected. And then down below, you see under Align and Transform, we have some Align options. And in this case, Align to Video Frame is the default. I'm going to align to Selection. And that will align them against each other. And I can align them on the right side. I can center them right against each other. In this case, I could align them to be perfectly flush left on their left edges, like so. So now I know those two are in perfect alignment. And I'm also going to align these two elements here. So this is the title and then the title box. And I'll make sure that they're perfectly centered against each other. So again, Align to Selection is selected. I'm going to center them like this. And then I'm going to center them vertically as well. So this is center them horizontal, and these options to the right are how you want them to align vertically. I can do top, bottom, or center. All right, my lower third is starting to come together here. I want to give myself some flexibility in this design so that if I grab an element and move it around, other elements that are supposed to come with it, in this case, this colored box behind the word Sprinter, I want that to move with the word Sprinter in case I want to reposition this. Maybe it's a little too close to that top line of text, for example. There's a few different ways I can do that. One way is to make a group within the layer stack here. So you see next to the new item option here in the properties panel, there's also this option to create a folder. So there we go. It says group 1. Again, I'll double click to rename it. And I'm just going to call this one job title. Like so, drag it again lower in the stack, and I will place both the Sprinter text and the title box inside that folder. And now there's just one element to deal with there. If I click on job title and move things around, I can change the position like so, and they will come with each other. Now notice there is a bounding box around the entire frame here, which is 1920 by 1080. So if you do make this type of grouping, just know that it's not constricted to the size of the elements in the group. It's actually in relation to the overall frame. So all of your numbers over here are going to have to be in relation to that frame, like so. But now if I go in here, I do want to move Sprinter around by itself. It's still not locked in though. That was just a temporary way to kind of attach both of these to each other. But what if I wanted this box to always move with the word Sprinter, or I wanted the box to change if I decide to change the text in here down the road to something else? I'd like the box to grow or shrink based on the size of this typography. Well, I can do that. This is a technique called pinning. I'm going to select the title box graphic here, and down below there's an option under responsive design to pin. And I'm going to pin to not the video frame, but I have other options. I can select anything else in my layer stack here in this graphic. I'm going to select the word Sprinter. And next to it, I have options for what I want to pin it to. So these lines here, these kind of T's, represent the different edges. So that's top edge, right edge, bottom, left. Or I can select that square in the center, and it will select all 4 edges. So make sure the word Sprinter is selected here, not video frame. You want to have Sprinter selected. And click that center square. It will pin it to all 4 corners of the layer that you selected. So now if I grab the word Sprinter and move it, you see the box is now attached and it's moving with it. So I'm going to put it back up here. I'm just going to pull it away from her name just a little bit. But pinning has another great feature, which is, again, it will grow or shrink based on the size of this text here. So if I go back to my text tool and I decide to change this to track and field athlete, you notice that the box grew with the type there. So that's the power of pinning, and this is very handy for things like lower thirds when you've got that type of colored box behind your text and you want it to grow or shrink based on how long that line of text is. Now before I go any further, I want to make sure that this lower third is adhering to the title and action safe guides. And I can find those here by clicking on the plus symbol and adding that button to my button bar like so in the program monitor, and then just clicking it to turn them on. Now whether you're working in broadcast or on the web, it's a good habit to get into to use these title safe guidelines to make sure that all the text you have on the screen falls within this center rectangle. And that ensures it will always be visible even if the edge of the monitor or whatever device that the person is viewing this on crops in for any reason on the edges. And you'll see I am actually out of what's called title safe over here on this side. So what I want to do is move the entire graphic over, not just them individually, and I could grab them like so and move them, but I want to grab them both together. So again, make sure nothing is selected, and now I can use the transform controls for the entire graphic with no layers selected. I'm going to move it over so that it's within title safe, and I'm actually going to move it up closer to the center like so. Now, if you don't want to use this button, by the way, you can also go under the wrench menu in the program monitor and just choose safe margins, like so. Now, let's take this lower third and apply it to someone else in our sequence here. So I've got this lower third for my athlete, and that's looking really good. I want to give the same lower third to this coach here. So I'm going to go back and hold down the Option or Alt key to quickly duplicate that lower third. So I just held down again the Option or Alt key and then dragged it over, and now I have a copy of that lower third. And I'm going to go in and change the name, and I'll just use the type tool and type that out, and I'm going to change his title, and I'm going to make it track and field coach. And again, notice that that box resizes there, so that pinning was really important, so we don't have to keep resizing that box on its own. So now we've got our lower thirds for our coach and our athlete. I can see them both labeled there in the timeline, and no matter how many times I duplicate this, they will be independent of each other, so changes to one do not affect the original. But now what happens if you want to change the design of this lower third later on as you're working on this program? you want to change the typeface or maybe the color of that box, you're going to have to go through each one of these and update them one by one because there's no kind of master template that they're all pulling from. You just want to be able to change one and have those changes kind of ripple through all of your lower thirds you've made in the program. Otherwise, it's a very tedious process to update them all. So let's actually set this up as a template to make it easier on ourselves. So I'm going to go back here to our first template here with Journey Woo, and I'm going to set this up with some styles. So if I click on her name here, we're going to scroll down again in the properties panel, and you see there's an option here for linked style. Right now it is set to none. If I click on that drop down, there are some options in there. I've already made some styles, but in this case, I'm going to make a brand new style and add it to this list that I can choose from. I'm going to click on the plus sign right here, and I have options to create style or import style. I'm going to create, and I get this dialog box here. And I'm going to call this athlete doc name. Something descriptive so you can figure out what this is when you see it in the browser. And I have options here. I can just save it to the project. I can also save it to local styles, which means it will show up in any other project that I'm working on. It's going to be available to me there. I can do both of those or just one or the other. In this case, I'm going to save it in the project because maybe a different project will take a whole totally different types of lower thirds. So I'm not going to save them kind of as a global style. I'm just going to save it inside this project, and I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to do the same thing for this text here. Plus symbol, create style, athlete doc job. And again, I will just save that to the project. All right, so now those are both styles. And I want to make sure that this second instance, since I've already made it, I want to make sure that this is updated. So I'm going to click this one open here. And in the link style now, I'm going to find athlete doc name. That was that first style that we made. That's just going to link that existing style to his name. Same thing for his job description here. I'm going to choose the job style that we just made. So if I go back, and let's say I wind up changing the color of that second line, like so, making it white, and maybe I'll change the weight of that back to regular, like so, I can update the style. Now I want these changes to be reflected across all the lower thirds that use this linked style. So I'm going to push this change to the linked style with this option right here. There's a button with a little right arrow next to these two boxes. And you'll notice that the link style says edited in parentheses. And that tells you that you've made a change to the style just in this one instance. And you can either leave it like that, or you can update the link style with these new parameters, which is the typeface change and the color. And if I click that button, that's been updated. And if I check that second lower third, indeed, that one was updated as well. I can do the same thing here. While I'm working, I decide, you know what, I kind of like that as the original color. I'm going to go back and change the fill of that back to black. And again, in the link style section, it says edited. I'm going to push that change to the main link style. If I go back to the first one, okay, now that one is back to the black text. Next to link style there's a little number that's telling you how many graphics currently use that style. So you see in this particular sequence, I have 2 graphics listed. They're both using this style. And I can obviously change that text to any other link style I want that's in that dropdown, and it will just update. So there's one I made for subtitles that really made a massive change there. So I'm going to set it back to job. There we go. Just updates automatically. If you want to see all of the styles in a browser, that's the option here. This is the 4 squares together next to that number. If you click that, it switches the properties panel to the style browser. And that's what you see here. And this is a little representation of what these styles look like. Some of them are just black text. You can see those. Some are blue, some are orange. I actually have some text that's white on blue. And I can also look at them in list view. And that gives me some more information, including what typeface and what size. So that's just different ways to look at the style browser here. This is a collection of all the styles I have to work with at the moment. Now, if I want to limit the view of all the styles I have available here, I can click on Local Styles, and this just tells me everything I've saved to my computer, or Open Projects, and there's a drop down there. If you have multiple projects open, you can select which one if you want. This just shows me the styles that have been saved inside this particular project. And if you save to both the local and the project, you may see the style twice. So don't be distracted by that. You can just limit the view there with one of those two checkboxes. Now notice over here in my project panel, I have two styles listed. The styles actually save as an item inside your project. They usually have a white label, and you'll see a little Premiere Pro logo next to it. You know that that is a text style, and in this case, I don't want them in my graphics folder necessarily. I already have a styles bin set up here, so I'll just select both of those and put those away, and I keep all my styles in there. One nice option of having the styles in the project panel like this is that you can actually drag and drop them onto pieces of text and instantly apply the style without having to go through the properties panel menus. So I'm going to select the athlete doc name style that we created, and I've got a new thing that I just typed in very quickly up here on the timeline, and I'm going to just drag and drop that over the graphic there in the sequence, and automatically updates it with that style. And I can still style it further if I want, make some changes. I'll go super bold, and I'm going to center it up and put it over him like so. There's a few of the features we have here for styling type. We have under appearance here, we can add a stroke. So I'll add a red stroke to that white text like so. And then you have control over the size of that stroke with this number right next to it, and then the option to grow that stroke from the outside of the letters, from the inside the letters, which if it's too much, it will actually overtake the fill color like so. And you can also kind of split the difference there and center that stroke. Below that, let me turn the stroke off, just go back to that regular white text. Below that, you have the option for a background, and this is going to create a colored block behind the text. And it defaults to a lower opacity than 100. So to really see this, I'm going to crank the opacity from 75 to 100. I'm going to choose something besides this gray. I'm going to go with kind of a blue box here. Something nice and bright like that. And you can see it's behind the text, but it's actually conforming right to the edges of the letters. We're going to expand that a little bit. That's what the box below is expansion. Like so, and you see the box is growing. This is sort of an alternative to having a colored bar below your text. If you want to add it as a background, you can do that. We'll always move with the text like so. And if you change the text, it changes with it, just like that pinned background box. Now below the background color, let me turn that back off again one more time, and this time I'm going to add a drop shadow. I will turn up the opacity on that shadow. We're going to make it pure black. And I can change the angle and the offset of that. Let me put it a little bit further over him like so. And change the offset. You can see it kind of pulling out from behind there. And grow it and soften it. It's a very easy way to make drop shadows there. Now, before we save off our lower third as a template, let's add some animation. I'm going to go back to that first instance of the lower third. I'm going to select it and select the name there. And I'm going to scroll down to Align and Transform. I can use the Property panel to create animation. I'm going to start with the Position keyframe by clicking on the diamond over here in this column here. By clicking this diamond, you turn on animation and you add a keyframe. I'm going to move my playhead in 15 frames and add a second position keyframe like so. And I'll use this little back arrow, which will take me back to the previous keyframe. So now I'm back on that first keyframe at the head of the graphic, and I'm going to adjust the position like so. I'm just going to drag it out so that it is completely off screen. And if I play it back, I can see the motion. Now, up here, I have the effects controls open, and you'll see that there is a one-to-one relationship between what is in the effects controls here for the graphic and what is in the properties panel. What effects controls gives you that properties panel doesn't is a little timeline over here. So when you open up the text layer, for example, I can see those two keyframes that I added right there next to the position property. So you have options depending on how you like to work. You can easily set keyframes in the properties panel, but if you want to actually see the keyframes and manipulate them a little bit more, you want to open up the effects controls. And while I'm in here, I can do things like this. I can select both keyframes, go down here and select Bezier, which is going to change it to that hourglass shape. And if you ever use After Effects, you'll know this as Easy Ease. And that just gives it a smoother motion into and out of an animation. And I can add additional keyframes here. I'm going to go back to the head of the shot. And I'll add a keyframe for opacity. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so I can see them, a little more space. And here I can add a keyframe for opacity at 100. And then at the beginning, it's going to be at 0. So it's just going to fade in a little bit. I'll have it fade in a little bit later so that now I can just grab that keyframe and move it over. Again, much easier here in effects controls. There we go. All right. And I'm going to animate that second line as well. So I'm just going to grab job title, which is this entire group here. And that has its own controls as well. So I can just animate that entire group, which was track and field athlete plus the box. I can have that animate together. And right as the name finishes coming in, that's where that one is going to start moving. So I'll set my first position keyframe there. And again, I will move ahead 15 frames. And I will set a second position keyframe. I'll go back to that first one, and that's when I will move that one off screen. That one will then slide in. I'll select both of those. Go down to Bezier. There we go. Let's play it back. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to add another element to this graphic while I have it here, and that is a little corner bug. In this case, I have the graphic already imported into the project over here, so I'm just going to grab it and pull it into the layer stack. I don't want it inside that job title folder. I want it at the very bottom here, so I'll pull it so it's a white line all the way across. There we go. So now it is outside of that folder, and I'm going to pull it down here to the lower left-hand corner. I turn on my action title save so I can line it up. I'm going to scale it down to about there. And I'm going to change the overall opacity so it blends in with the background a little bit. I'm going to go 45. All right, so it's just a little bit transparent there. And I'll move it over a little bit more. There we go, nice and tucked in. And I'm going to animate that. I'm going to have that slowly fade in as the rest of the elements are coming in here. So I'm going to park my playhead at the very last keyframe of the entire animation there, and I'm going to set an opacity keyframe. So again, over in effects controls now, I can find that logo that I imported here in effects controls. There it is. I'll open it up, and I'm going to click the stopwatch to set a keyframe for opacity, and which in this case is at 45%. And I'll move the playhead back to the beginning, and I will just change that to 0. That will automatically set a beginning keyframe, and now if I play it back, it's going to fade in to 45% over the course of the entire animation in here. Now I'm going to add a closing animation as well. So all these elements have animated on. I want to animate them off. I'm just going to do a simple fade out at the end. I could try to use vector motion here, which again controls everything of this on this graphic, the position and the scale and the rotation, if I want to animate all those elements at once. But unfortunately, opacity is not listed in that section. It's not in vector motion. It's actually down at the bottom under the video motion tab here at the bottom of the effects controls. You see that there is opacity. It's separated out. I'm going to move my playhead to the end of this graphic. I just typed the end key on my keyboard and the playhead snapped to the end of it. And I'm going to turn on the stopwatch for opacity. That sets my final keyframe there. I'm going to back it up about 12 frames. There we go. Set another keyframe there. And for that final keyframe, I'm going to set that to 0 so that all the elements just fade away at the end. Let me turn off that action title save. There we go. Now that looks okay, but I want to add a little more pizzazz to this lower third animation here at the end. I want them to blur as they're fading out. How do we do that? Well, we can actually add an effect to the layer stack in this graphic. So I'm going to go to the effects panel, and I'm just going to type in Gaussian, and it found the effect I want, which is Gaussian blur. And I'm going to drag that into the graphic. And it's going to sit right there above everything in the entire graphic. Put the playhead back there. Now, the way this works is if you drag an effect into the graphic like this, it's going to affect everything below it. So if you just wanted to affect, say, this logo here, I would drag it down so that it just is over the logo. And then over here in effects controls, let me close some of these up here so I can find it. There is the effect right there. There's Gaussian blur. And if I add blur to it, it's just blurring what is underneath it. And as I move that up, it's blurring whatever is below it. In this case, I want it to blur everything. So I'm going to put it in the top of the stack like this. Set that blur back to 0 and find that last keyframe there on opacity. And I'm going to start the blurriness there. There's my first keyframe. Again, use that handy right arrow to go to the next keyframe of the fade out. So I know I'm right there at the end, and that blur will be at 100. And now if I play it back, they blur while they are fading out. So again, you can put all types of effects here from the effects palette into your graphic if you want, and then you control them and keyframe them over here in the effects controls. Now I'm going to make this animation part of the template that I'm going to save. But before I do that, I want to make sure that these animations, the opening and the closing animation of this graphic, that they stay no matter how long or how short this graphic becomes. So let's say, for example, I need to use this lower third again further down in the sequence for this shot of Journey. And I'm just going to, again, option drag it over here. Still has my animations as part of it. But if you look closely here at the sequence, the clip changes here, and I want the lower third to end before the cut point. So I would have to pull in the end of the graphic. But if I do that, I'm going to lose the ending animation that I made, that fade out with the blur. So what do? There's a way to set up protective zones on either end of this graphic using responsive time. And that's going to allow me to protect the area that the animation falls into. So when I shrink or grow the graphic, it's going to go from the middle out instead of from the edges. So let me show you how to set that up. So I'll go back here to, I'll delete this one for now. I'll go back here to that first instance of the graphic and select it. And with no layers selected there in the properties panel, I can go down here and see responsive design, time, intro and outro duration. So the intro duration needs to cover all of these keyframes here in effects controls up until this point here. And then the outro needs to cover these keyframes here. Now for intro, I'm going to set that to 1 second. I'll type a 1 followed by a period. And over here in effects controls, I can see this gray band. That's the protected zone. It's not quite long enough to hit these final keyframes there and protect them. I can increase the length over here, or I can actually grab, there's a little line there that coincides with the edge of it. And if I just park my cursor over, I can pull it over just so it's past those. And the same thing for the outro duration. I believe I had that set for 12, and I'm just going to pull that over a little bit more so it definitely fits. And you'll see down here on the timeline for that clip, I can see a representation of those protected zones at the beginning and the end of that clip as well. It's not on this lower third because I haven't turned it into a template yet. So it's just on this one for now. So now I've set up those protective zones. And now what will happen is, let me zoom back out. If I then copy that to the other instance, I can then pull the graphic to make it shorter. And you see that the ending animation is still there. And if I need to make that graphic longer, in this case, I'll move it down to this second shot of her and I'll extend it so that it is longer than the original animation. The opening animation is still there, and the closing animation is still there. Again, it's just going to grow from the middle out or from the middle in if you decide to make it shorter. All right, now we're ready to save this as a template. I'm going to save it as a motion graphics template or a MOGRT. And the way we do that is we click on the graphic like so, And under graphics and titles here, this menu at the top, we're going to export as a motion graphics template. And in this box here, we have options here. We're going to name it. So I'm going to call this athlete lower third version 1. And we have several options as to where this could go. The local templates folder will put this on your computer, and it will only be visible to you on your system. You can also do local drive. That's actually going to save it as a MOGRT file on your desktop or in your file browser. And you can share that with other people, import that into other projects at will if you want to on other systems. You can also put it into a library, and that's this list down here. In this case, I have one for my lower thirds. I have one already set up for athlete documentary, for example, so I could put it in there. And here you see include video preview is an option. So there's a little video preview of what it will do. And there's just some compatibility warnings. If it contains a font that is not available on Adobe fonts, the person opening this MOGRT on a different system may have to track down the fonts that you've used if they're not Adobe fonts. And also warn them if you've included any third-party effects that are only on your system. If you put those as part of the MOGRT, they won't be on the other system and you'll get an error. So this is just a way to quickly warn yourself if any of those things have been added to this template before you save it off. And you can throw in some keywords just so you can find this a little easier if you need to down the road. So for example, lower third, athlete, graphic, whatever you want to add. All right, so I've got my name, the destination, in this case it's a library, include the video preview, give me those warnings, and I've added some keywords. Now I'll hit OK. And there we go. So the warnings didn't trigger anything for me, so I know my fonts are going to be okay, and that filter effect that I added is going to be okay. And now I'm going to go to the libraries panel over here and scroll down to athlete documentary. And there it is right there in the library. And I'm going to go ahead and pull it back into my sequence. I'm going to delete that version we had with the coach because it's not one of those templates. I'm going to pull this back over and just quickly redo it. There we go. The typography is the same. The font is the same. And with those styles, I made sure that everything is correct. Actually, I think we did this. We just changed the title. Here we go. Again, the styles are still embedded here. So if we change the style, it's going to update this lower third. And all of our animation that we added is still intact for this copy of it. Now, if I wanted this to be part of my system templates and show up in the browser panel, I can save it there as well. Go back to that graphic again, and I'll export as motion graphics template and call it again athlete lower third version 1. But in this case, I am going to put it in the local templates folder. And I'm going to skip these other options for now just to hit save very, very quickly. And if I go back now to the graphics templates and go to and make sure local templates is selected, there it is. It popped up at the top of the list. And I can again just drag and drop it out of there and drag it onto my sequence. Now, once items are in the browser, you can pull them into any project, any sequence that you want. So if I would say want to pull a different version of this lower third that I made previously here, I'm going to drag it out of the browser back into this sequence. And there's that earlier version that I made of that template. So anything in here, you just drag and drop it right out of the browser, right onto your timeline. So if I want, let's say, to add an overall title to this entire program here, I can grab this circular reveal title here, pull it into the program. And there we go. We've got some nice alpha channel with that. If I click on it, I can see my options that are available to me over here in the properties panel again. So there's that center circle. I can change these colors to be closer to what I had in my lower third if I want. So I can make that one orange, and I can make the outer circle. Maybe that one will be a slightly darker version of that color. So I'm going in orange, but I'll do this. There we go. And I can change that text just by using the regular text tool. Now there's one more way to save these lower thirds in Premiere Pro, and that's as a source graphic. That's different from a typical template in that a source graphic lives in the bins. It's actually going to create a graphic that's going to be part of the project file. And when you change one instance of that source graphic, it'll change them all. It's a very specific use case. So for example, if I go down here to the coach and decide I'm going to make that a source graphic, I'll go back here under graphics and titles and say upgrade to source graphic. And in this case, the intro outros will not be saved. It can't be saved as part of a source graphic. So I'm going to hit OK and hit yes. And now if I go back to my project file, I will see a graphic listed here. And I'm going to rename that really quickly as Coach Matthews, so I know what it is. And that is now a source graphic. And let me clear a couple of these out here. And I'll pull that here again. And one more time, like so. The way that this is useful is, what if I get to the end of my project and someone finally does their due diligence and says, you know, you've been spelling his name wrong the entire time. It's actually Kelland. And so I'm going to select my type tool and add the D to his first name. It should have been Kellen Matthews, not Kellen. And because it's a source graphic, every instance of that graphic will be updated. In this case, I need to move these back to their proper position. There we go. So that will update every time. And oh, we didn't have the right title, or perhaps he has a doctorate, like so. That's also going to be updated in each of his lower thirds. So again, if you update one instance of a source graphic, it's going to update every copy of that source graphic in the entire project. There's special use cases for this source graphic. It's helpful if you want something actually in the bins, you can quickly drag and drop on other timelines. Or if you think you may be updating titles or spelling or thing like that over time, and you don't want to have to redo a bunch of these that are inside the same project, you may want to look at a source graphic as opposed to a typical MOGRT. Now, there's one more thing I want to show you here, and that's how to style your subtitles or captions in Premiere Pro. I'm going to go into my sequence here. I'm going to quickly turn off that video 2 track that has all of my lower third graphics in there. And I've unmuted those channels so that I can see my transcript. I've already transcribed this sequence here and all of these clips. So I'm going to go open up the text panel. And now I'm going to go over here to the captions tab. And I'm going to create captions from transcript. Now I can pick the type of captions I want. I can do subtitles, or I can do closed captions in various flavors here. I'm just going to stick with subtitle for now, and I can mess around with some of these options in here and see there is a style drop down there as well. If I've already established a subtitles style, I'm going to choose subtitles version 1 that I've already made. I can choose that style now, and they're going to be created in that style. And now I create captions. And there we go. So you'll see it says subtitle up here. It creates a brand new track above all the other tracks here. And they are visible here in these blocks, like so. And by clicking on them, it corresponds to that same block up there in the captions panel. And if I hit play, that's going to highlight.
Yes, I did. I started out at University of Washington. I did.
And if I click on any of these individual text blocks up here in the subtitle track, you can see that that is also being pulled up here in the properties panel. It tells me the caption track number. In this case, it came up as caption track number 3, and it's called subtitle. You see that right there at the top, and you actually see a little preview of the text right there. And I can click on it, and I can actually alter the text here if I want to. There needs to be a period there, not a comma, so I can quickly correct that right there in the program window. And you see there, I've got all these controls just like I had for regular text, including the color, stroke, background, drop shadow, and the alignment. And I can change that. I'm just changing only one of them though. If I just change one, I'm not changing any of the others. So if I go back here and I make this one filled in with green, oops, I have to select the text first. There we go. Make that all green. It's just going to affect the one instance of that clip like so, and not the rest of them. So in that case, I need to go back and see it says subtitles edited. I want to revert that to the subtitle style. How do I do that? You actually flip it to none and go back in and reselect the subtitle style. But now what happens if I want to actually change the subtitles for the entire sequence here? I want to update it once and then have it ripple through to all the other subtitles. So in this instance here, I'm going to change the fill color to something a little darker, like that orange, like there, like so. And I'm going to change the point size a little bit. Right now it's at 48. I want to make it 54, a little bit larger. And now you see it says subtitles version 1 edited under the track style. I again can redefine that style. I'm going to again push that style. And I have an option there, all captions on the track or the overall style in the project. So it's one or the other. So all captions on track will only do this instance of those captions in this sequence. The original style will not be modified. If I modify the original style, it's going to do both. It's going to modify all these subtitles and any future subtitles that uses this style. All right, and now all of these subtitles have inherited that new style. And again, if I go back and change something on one of them, like the fill color, and redefine, it's going to change them all. And you can still do individual subtitles, as I mentioned. So you go and you have the type tool, and let's say you want to just modify one word, make it larger, change the color. You can still do that right there. And just don't redefine the style, just leave it, and that can be its own special instance of that subtitle. So that's it for creating text and graphics with the Properties panel inside Premiere Pro. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you on the next one.